So I think I mentioned to you, Jody, that my podcast name is The Big Questions.
I didn't know that.
Oh, well, there you go. I guess I should have told you before I invited you on. The Big Questions. I sent you some samples. You can see kind of the questions that I'm getting at. So what I like to do first and foremost is ask what appears to be the simplest question, but sometimes happens to be quite complicated. Who are you?
That's super funny because that's the worst question of all your questions. Like I was like, oh, like, and you had highlighted it. So I knew we were doing it. We were going to answer it. But I was thinking, even when people like back in the day would send those emails around and it would be like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? And I can't pick. Well, like Free Willy. I'm like a big Free Willy fan. And that's like why I would watch it and then just want to move to the island. But, no, like I can't pick. And then I was thinking, it's not that I think I'm unique or, that in some way I'm like, you can't label me. Like, it's not like that. But it's that, yeah. So I work in business. I manage 2 insurance brokerages. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I love fitness. I love eating. Like, but those things I don't like, they are labels, but they don't make me who I am. They don't explain to you who I am. And so then I thought really long and hard about this. And I thought, there's got to be an answer to who I am. And then I thought, if you led with what are the desires of your heart? So if you led with, okay, then all of a sudden you can see who I am. So I'm going to explain just a little bit about the desires of my heart and the motivations behind like everything I do. And so one of the things I would say, number one is, and I'll explain it, but a woman after God's heart. So when I say that, I mean that everything I do, well, I want to say and say, but I'm sure God's like, Jody, a lot of times with like half the stuff.
Did you really have to say that, Jody?
That's like the story of my life. But no, so I think I go hard after God's heart. And that means like through prayer, meditation, daily focus, reading my Bible. But it's not about rules for me. It's not about any of those things. It's that when I feel connected to the source like that, everything that flows out of me is more loving, is more beautiful. And so with that, so that's like my core push. That's like what I push towards, what I gravitate to. But then my biggest joy and love is loving people, like tipping what they think upside down, polishing them so that they can see the ways they shine. Like I absolutely am a fierce people lover. So I feel like if you identify me as those 2 things, all of a sudden you can see the mom I am. You can see the way I lead my people with like kindness and respect. And I push them because I think they were made for more. And so I think, those are my 2 things. And then if you view everything about me through that lens, I'm just like passionate. So like, when I sit down with some pierogies, like I'm probably going to eat a lot of them. Like, I'm just like, I am. And when I go and work out, like I am going to do burpees with a clap at the top and a push up at the bottom. Like I go full out in life all the time. So everyone that I love, like I love them hard. So that's where I feel like all of a sudden, if you understand that I'm like pushing for more conviction in my heart, more growth, more love, then you can see all the other parts of me. It might not tell you I love Free Willy, but it helps you really understand who you're going to hang out with, who you're going to get, because those are my core desires.
That's a lovely answer. So much to talk about there. But before we go any further, I'm gonna ask you a more practical question with respect to identity. What's your name?
Oh.
So the viewers know who I'm talking to.
I go by many names because sometimes I like to hide. So I am Jody Adele. Okay. That's my first and middle name. And then I got married and kept my maiden name, like kind of a feminist, but like didn't hyphenate it. Like I don't want to go to war and I want to make pie, but I'm going to like rise up and fight for women's rights. So I am like Jody Adele Lee, as my husband says, Space Grim. So Grim is my married last name.
Okay.
But I just can't be identified because I like to hide from like people I knew in high school, or I don't know. Sometimes I'm Jody Adele. Sometimes I'm Jody Adele Lee Grimm. If you're looking, for the insurance council, it depends. Yeah. Like I'm like hiding on all these levels.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I used to do all my online blogging and videos with like a pen name for the same reason, just in case I said the wrong thing and I didn't want to get in trouble. But
Totally.
yeah, I understand that for sure. Okay, so Jody, you said a lot of stuff in that introduction, but what I like the most is that you got to the core of who you are. You didn't just stay at the surface and tell me that you're, like you said, a branch manager or an insurance person or a mother. You went down to the foundation of who you are, which, as you said, will inform all the other parts of you, right? Because everything comes from that foundation. That's really insightful. So I really appreciate that answer. With respect to what you do outside of work and outside of the family, I see you have a beautiful microphone there that your husband bought you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing online on Instagram and with your podcast?
So I wanted to have a podcast called Get Real with Jody, but there were like other famous people that were getting real. So then I was like, I can't pick anything. And I've had a few different people at different jobs that would require I came to the office for certain things. And it was literally for my energy, because I'm super energetic. And my last owner of my last business would be like, I just need you to come every day for like at least 2 hours. And like, I had a 40-minute commute. And I was like, he's like, because I just need more Jody at the office to get the day going, which was a really funny compliment. And at the time I was so annoyed by it because I just would rather be at home doing some of that work. So it became a thing when I talked to the guys making my logo, where they're like, more Jody. Like, you just need more Jody all the time. And so it sounds so narcissistic, and like, that's not the intention. So I struggled with it, but my whole thing in life is more courage, more vulnerability, and just a little more Jody to brighten your day. Like, that's kind of how I frame it. But I wanted a podcast about real people. So they're not famous people. They're real people. Everyone has a past. Everyone has a childhood. Everyone has certain levels of trauma. And I think that when you look at epigenetics and the imprints on our DNA of, the traumas before us and all those things impact us. And so often in the past, not the desire, and it wasn't like, I don't think it was intentional. I think it's unconscious, but it's unconsciously we bury these traumas and then they bury us for the next generations, right? So my goal is that we'd share some hard stories. Like, did you grow up on the reserve? Where'd you grow up? Were you sexually abused? Did you have a great childhood that pushed you on? Like, what makes each person who they are? So now that you asked me that, and it took me so much thinking to have an answer for you, I feel like now I want to ask people that, like, who are you? Yeah. Right. So I'm like, so glad you asked that question. And so I think that's the goal of my podcast, is that people would hear other people's stories and it would change the decisions they make going forward, because they now have a better understanding of possible outcomes. Or when you see someone do something hard, all of a sudden there's this thought in you that's like, I could do that. Like, I have a friend, my friend's husband, he's a teacher, but I think he was like literally made to be like, I don't know if it's like motivational speaker or like a psychologist, like a counselor, something like that. And so he applies that as a teacher, but there's just like something in him that when I was like, oh, I'm writing I'm writing a book and I'm starting a podcast, his face was like, and I know that inside him, he's like, why am I not doing that? Yeah. It had nothing to do with me. And everything to do with, but that's what I want. And I'm writing a book. I don't know what it's called yet, but I've got 20 pages of a book that's a motivational book for girls ages like 13 to 20. Because I think if we could catch people when they're young and about to make some super powerful decisions and call them out of living in shame, making decisions out of insecurity, that sort of thing, like, we can change the world. Because I do feel like women add a softness and, a strength that's so different from men and yet so complementary, that if we can have more women healed and operating not out of insecurity and not like seeking their whole life to just be picked or be chosen. Like, as girls, we're like, I just want them to like me. I just want them to pick me. And what if we know on our own we're not good enough? We're just right. And so my goal through the podcast and the book is that I just want to call people, not just women, but primarily my heart is for women, but call people to like a more conscious life, a more intentional, focused existence, because I think that's where there's like so much revelation and beauty and joy.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm doing. So it's the More Jody podcast. So people should check it out.
Well, yeah, we'll link to it. I'll put it in the comments, obviously, and everything, so that my 10 followers can hit you up.
To my 10 followers, they can all connect.
Okay, well, excuse me. I want to continue the thread that you started here. I had other questions, but I think that what you're saying here is far more interesting than what the questions I had for you. So I'm going to ask you this. What you're talking about with young women, I couldn't agree with you more. What I would like to know from you is, what do you think is man's role in this? Do you think that this is just women doing the work with other women to heal themselves? Or do you think that men can and should perhaps be also playing a role in that, either directly or indirectly? Like, I have my own theories on this, but I would like to hear your thoughts, and maybe I can share mine after if you're inclined to hear it. Yeah,
I love your thoughts too. That is so hard, because I do have, that is just so hard, because I love people. So I love men and I love women. It's not just that I love women. I think that I've grown up also I didn't grow up with any sexism. Like my dad, in my family, my dad treated us like equals. It was, what do you want to do? Like, there was nothing that made me feel, I never felt, I don't have anything. I don't have any words. I don't have, when someone has been wronged and then they operate out of a place where they're like, they jump when someone, like that, if they've had triggered. Yeah. So I don't feel like I don't have any real triggers. But to go to the Bible, just for like a quick second, I think about Adam and Eve, and I think about that story. And I think about Adam not taking leadership. So I think my first call would be for men to, like, I think a lot of men don't take leadership, and a lot of men are stepped on by their spouses, or I would love men to take a stronger leadership in life. I guess it's like, because I look at Adam and Eve, and she was the one to take the apple and take a bite, and I don't like that she did that, but I love that she did that. So I'm like, it's like I'm like, oh yeah, because she was like, this is, I want more knowledge, I want more wisdom. And so yes, it was, she believed a lie, but like through that, like I love that she like rose up. And yet I'm like, sister, like if Adam would have been like, you know what, this is a bad choice, and yet that's like, then the world goes on from there. So it's all like meant to be. But at the same time, I would love men to have stronger leadership, because I think when a man is truly secure in who he is, his leadership is just going to bless and help a woman like flower. Like a cheesy, gross
It's all good.
way to say it. So that's where I feel like I have a call for men, just like women, to rise up with a strong voice. But if it works the way it's supposed to, then it's that he's going to pull her up, and he's going to I don't know, sort of elevate her, because when we're secure, we elevate others.
That's right.
Right. So it's like heal people, hurt people, free people. Yep. And so it's that sort of thing. So I think that if a man is really secure in who he is and taking his own leadership, he's going to feel good. Yes. And then he's going to elevate her. Right. So I love men and I love women. And I think that in a beautiful, healed space, it's the best ever. Yeah. I really do think it's the best ever. And so I like men that I don't think that they need to say that they're less valuable or that women are more valuable. I see us as equal, but I see us as equally beautiful. And the more we both add to it, the better everything is. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. And, you said some pretty telling things there. I think your father did a great job.
He's the best.
And do you have sons or daughters, or a mix of both?
I have 2 boys.
Okay.
And they are just about to be 10 and 8. Yeah. So
you're teaching them how to be, good leaders and gentlemen, right? I mean, obviously.
I'm trying to teach them to be courageous.
There you go.
That's what I'm trying to teach them most of all. Yeah.
Well, and I think for a man to be courageous, we tend to think of courage in outward ways, like, facing off against the enemy and going on adventures and stuff. But I think real courage for men these days is being vulnerable and, and embracing their own inner feminine side. And so that's kind of where I was going with it in terms of how men can help women. I think men can help women by working on their own shit. And men, unfortunately, being the source of all the shit in the world, we have a lot of that intergenerational trauma. We have a lot of cultural conditioning that is detrimental to being a balanced and healthy human being. Our concepts of masculinity, what it means to be a real man, and all these things about toxic masculinity that's been coming out these days. When I first heard about toxic masculinity, I told a friend, I was like, what is it? Right. And they described it to me. And I was like, oh, that's called masculinity. That's the only masculinity I've ever known. Putting each other down, guy friends busting each other's balls. Insecurity, as you said, when you're insecure, the only way to rise up is to put other people down. Right. Yeah. And so, if men could be more secure in themselves, they won't be afraid of women. They won't be afraid that women are, they're taking, they should be in the kitchen and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. There's nothing wrong with a woman being the bread earner. That's an outdated image that we have, that the man has to go make the money and the woman has to be in the kitchen. I think that, as you said, you particularly like to be in the kitchen, but you also like to lead. You like to, these ideas of masculine qualities and feminine qualities, I think are a little bit outdated. And I think they're more harmful than good, because a woman should be able to lead and a man should be able to be submissive and vice versa. It's just individuals, right?
Yeah. And the healthier we are, we do that.
Exactly.
But if we're unhealthy, then and most people, like you said, won't. It kills me. There's like nothing sadder, because it feels like such a waste of humanity when people won't fix the thing, like do the hard work, cry the tears that need to be cried for things that have happened. And shame silences people. And so I think when there's shame and there's no light shone on it, it just stays in the dark and it just rots you. And that's where I feel like, but doing the work isn't fun, but like an easy life isn't a good life.
No, exactly. And like growth and comfort don't coexist. If you want to grow, you're not going to be comfortable. Growth is painful or uncomfortable, right? So
totally.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, that's awesome work. And I mean, who better to write a book to help young women than a young woman like yourself who's doing the work and who's leading by example. You're not, you talked about men being leaders. Even though men technically run the world, I mean, most of the leaders, statesmen, all that stuff are primarily men. There are very few male leaders out there. There's a lot of bosses. There's not a lot of leaders. Right. And I completely agree. It's a completely different quality. To lead is not to manage or to be the boss. You can be a leader and have no position of authority, just like you can be a boss and be a complete terrible leader because you don't know what it means to lead. So yeah, It's interesting that you say men being leaders, even though we technically are in positions of power everywhere, we don't lead. You're totally right. It's kind of a bummer.
I would like to say something I've been reading is Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. And I struggle because, like I said, and that's where I don't have to be just like, I can be whoever I want to be. I can be in the kitchen. I can be in corporate, nationally, corporate company, whatever. But I think one of my struggles, like her book is very, very well written. It's very honest about a woman leaning in instead of like leaning back and taking steps back all the time. But yeah, there are very few female CEOs. I think it's only 15% or something. And it's the exact same it was in the 90s. Like it hasn't changed. And that's where she's like, we're not progressing. Okay. And one of my goals is to be on a senior leadership team because I want to impact the company from the top down. Yeah. But not a lot of people at the top would want what I would push them to do. So that's where I'm like,
yeah, well, it's a blessing and a curse to be a leader like yourself. And, I was chatting with a colleague of ours a couple of days ago, actually, and she was saying like, they don't want people like you at that stage of the organization because you have your own opinions. You're not afraid to state them. And when people push back, you're not just going to lay down, you go back and forth and, you'll have good points, and they don't really want people like that at the top. And I get a feeling that's kind of what you're like,
Yeah. Well, and I'm like a true entrepreneur in my heart. And that's partly why I probably should be in doing something. I have a dream now. I said something to somebody one day, and it's just like that. You say something and I was like, I want a foundation. They were like, what if you could have maximum impact, what would it be? And I was like, oh, well, like I would work to stop human trafficking. Like right there, I would have a foundation that works to protect women and children. And like, that's what I would do. And it was just so funny. So now it's in my Start Today journal every day. I'm like, I have a foundation that protects women and children. And so that's the sort of thing where, I think it makes me sad because I think I could have huge impact. And one of my dreams, like years ago, I wanted to be an executive coach, and I wanted to be working with like CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and I wanted to help them push through their crap and go to the next level. Because if we can have leaders functioning, like it is maximum impact for revenue, for companies, everything, even for how they work together. But no one's looking to hire someone like that. No. So it's like, oh, okay. Right. So yeah, that is tough. And it's definitely hard for me too, because I am like such an entrepreneur in my heart. And yet I'm leading people in a different capacity than that.
But you found a niche. I mean, and this is something that I've come to terms with in the last few years, because like you, I have maybe aspirations or certain callings that I feel, or I used to feel, weren't really being met. But when I started to sort of shift my perspective and look at things differently, I realized that everywhere I am, whatever job I'm in, there are opportunities for me to pursue my calling. It might not be to its full degree, but in your case, you can inspire people, you can help them be better, all that kind of stuff. All the things you want to do on a grand scale, you can do, in the offices that you manage. So, it's interesting. I mean, we do what we can where we are, but definitely nice to have bigger dreams, like a foundation. And so
just go as far as you can.
Yeah. Right? Well, dream big, right? I mean, you got to aim high if you want to, hit a target. So I think, there's nothing wrong with that. But one of the things that you brought up there, it sounds like you have some kind of journal every morning you read, or that you write in or something. Or
so many things I do in the morning.
Yeah. You have your morning practice. Yes. Yeah. And from what I understand, your morning practice seems to be, you mentioned meditation, prayer. Now you have maybe a journal. It sounds like you're pulling a lot of different practices from beyond maybe your Christian background. So where do you get your inspiration from? Obviously, the Bible and Christianity is a big part of it. Do you have other sources or other places that you like to go to for that kind of inspiration or soul food?
I want to say one thing to the last thing, but I'm going to answer that question. Is a great question.
Okay.
But the thing I was going to say about my last thing is I get to lead right now 14 women.
Wow.
Every day. So as much as, insurance is the vessel.
Yes.
I get to call them to step up. I get to push them to see fear, or a lot of these things is just like a line in the sand that then like the wave just washes it away and you're like, it's gone, And so that's what I was going to say is it's about digging in where you are right now. And then like I always say, like palms open for like the next thing. Yeah. So you push hard, you do the hard work with those people. And then when the next opportunity comes that you're like with wisdom and discernment, you're like, yep, I think it's time to step on. So leading those women is like a gift that I get to do through the vessel of insurance. Okay, next question. Okay, so interestingly, I was thinking about you had a question on the list of questions about spirituality versus religion. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because I hate both of those terms. Mm. And I was like, oh, because people know that my foundation is like Jesus died for my sins. I, accept my sinfulness. I am cleansed. I live a rebirth life or whatever, because that is my foundation. I'm identified as a Christian, which is true. But I also was thinking about, I have a lot of friends right now that do like tarot cards or hold crystals or all of these different things. And similar to how you had said, you're kind of like a conduit for some of this stuff is how you see it. And I think a lot, I put frankincense oil on my face today because it's supposed to like bring, I don't know, some sort of like, it's supposed to do something through my nose and make me, I don't know, super aware, something like that. So I do see a lot of these things as assets. Mm-hmm. Not into tarot cards. I'm not really into holding crystals. However, every morning I drink a super green smoothie because I believe there is energy in that plant life that goes into my body and makes me feel amazing. So I do believe in energy. I do believe in like the transfer of energy. But I'm like, there is like a capital G God that I'm like, I just want to go to him. So why would I do something that's like kind of a pathway to a higher power when I'm like, no, like I know him, he loves me. I'm going to, anyway, so that's kind of where I do see all of these things. So I do grab certain little things. I love essential oils. Like I absolutely love them. But I do see it from like a kind of a different perspective, and it's not my foundation. It's just something I might add. Lavender helps me go to sleep. It's just, it's like probably an elixir from way back in the day that they would have used for all these, it has all these medicinal purposes. So I do see value in some of those other things. Like I have a salt rock right here, catching all of my negative ions, or I don't know, it looks pretty, right? So there is like, I'm really fluid in a lot of those ways. But to speak to, I don't identify myself as a spiritual person. I guess maybe that one's a little bit more, but like religious, that's just like, ugh, like the whole world is like, yuck. Like religion has torn us apart. The structure of religion has ruined us. And I feel like God is like, guys, like you're missing the point. The building, the label you give yourself isn't what matters. Like I'm here to love you and change your life and revolutionize how you interact with each other. But you're like seeing just these boxes we're all in and then being terribly mean to each other based on religion. Like I just struggle with that. But I have a relationship with God. So throughout the day, like, so I start in the morning, I get up at 5:30. I will, like today, before we met, or actually yesterday, I woke up feeling really angsty. So it's not a real word, but I use it all the time. I'm making it a word. I felt really angsty in my spirit, just like, like something wasn't right. And when that happens, I have a hard time praying because my prayers would be like, hey God, I just feel like really uncomfortable today. And like, I just don't know what, like, I just don't even know. Yeah. And so I feel like when that happens, I literally said like, hey God, these are the things I feel really stressed about today that are really heavy on my heart. Your word says your yoke is easy and your burden is light. And so God, I'm going to cast all my cares on you. And I just like wrote out like, it was a whole page. It was like bullet, 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 bullet. And then at the side, I just wrote COVID. Ugh. Because I'm just so freaking over it. So I dumped all my cares. And then I actually fasted. I fasted until 2:00. I wanted to go till 3, but I was like, I'm so hungry. And there's like Halloween candy everywhere. There's Halloween candy everywhere. So because I do very much believe in the spiritual world. I do believe there are like demons that are here to keep us insecure, keep us playing small, try to ruin our relationships, because I do believe God is greater, but I do believe in Satan. So I would say that when I wake up feeling like that, I got to connect. I got to go right to the source. So I dumped those out. And then this morning when I got up, I was super excited to talk to you. But this is a topic, I feel really safe with you, but this is a topic that in the world is very uncomfortable. People don't love Christians, right? A lot of times.
I don't know. I actually don't. I don't know very many Christians. You might actually, from the sounds of it, you might be one of the first I've ever met.
Oh, there you go.
I know a lot of people who claim to be Christians, but and when you actually listen to them talk and view their actions, it's like, have you ever read any of this stuff?
And that's why a lot of people don't like Christians, right? It would just be like,
but those aren't, I mean, again, it depends on how you define a Christian, but if you define a Christian by someone who follows Christ's teachings and they're doing the opposite and they're acting more like Pharisees, I think that maybe they're not looking at Christians. And so you shouldn't actually form an opinion about Christians based on those people, because they might not be real Christians. I mean, I'm not a person to say who's real and who's not, because I'm not a Christian myself, but
I wouldn't say either, even for myself. I'm like, God judges our hearts and he knows everyone's heart.
Exactly.
Right.
But based on the reading of the Gospels and the understanding of the basic, things that Jesus taught. And again, I have a very basic understanding. It's not like a very refined one, but I know the opposite when I see it. So it's kind of like, anyways, regardless. But so you say you're not religious. So I can assume then that you don't identify with one of the major sects of Christianity. You're not a Catholic or a Protestant or an evangelical. You're just doing Jody.
I would call myself an evangelical.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, so like going back a little bit to that morning routine. So I will I will do that. I will connect. I will dump it out. I will also be like, God, I don't know what I've missed. I don't know like how I might've wronged people. Like I'm so human in my heart, and COVID has not brought out the best in me. Like this face is around a lot. And so something that I'll do, so I'll start my day with prayer. I don't meditate every day. And most Christians aren't for meditation, because back in like the 90s, it was like, that's like emptying your mind. But I literally will set a timer, because I am like so fast moving that meditation is really hard for me. I will set a timer for 5 minutes. I used to work my way up. I think I got to 10, but I'm back to 5. And I will sit palms open and I will breathe really deep. And then I will literally, there is, I want to say Samuel in the Old Testament was a little boy, and he kept hearing God, but he thought it was Eli, I think, calling from like the other room. So he would go back and be like, well, you called me. And he was like, no, I didn't call you. Finally, the rabbi or whatever was like, it's God calling you. And so he just says, he said, just go back and say, your servant is here and your servant is listening. So that is what I repeat. Like every time my brain scrolls out, I'm like, your servant is here and your servant is listening.
Nice.
Because we can just do this.
Right.
Like, obviously I'm like the queen of that. So then to take a minute and just be like, God, I want to hear from you. I'm just here. And no, like 99% of the time I don't hear anything, but it's a good practice for my body. And stuff as well. And then but it's different every day. So if one day I get up and I'm like, my new thing lately is taking the Psalms in the middle of the Bible, and I will pray one. I will like change the language, like, and I will take the promises of God and pray them over my life. So I'm trying to use the scripture to pray the scripture. And then during the day, like I will literally over and over be like, because I am so human. And I think when you're open to your humanness and the state of your own darkness in your own heart, I'll be like, God, crucify my flesh. Like it's true. Like or like, just give me love for this person, like, and help me. Like I think about the disciples in the New Testament and how it's like, you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be like, wherefore art thou? Like, you're just like, God, help me. God, help me right now. And my biggest thing to people who don't understand, like there's so much to understand, so much I don't understand. But my biggest thing to people is like, challenge God. Be like, hey, God, every day for like 6 months, be like, God, are you here? Are you real? God, help me. And like, he will show up in ways that you're like literally almost creeped out by. You're like, that was only God. There's nothing else that could have been. And so I just challenge people to start talking to him, because I think prayer is your absolute like lifeline. And I live a better life when I'm not connected like that. Like if I get up and go about my day 4 days in a row, by like the 5th day, I feel that like need to connect. And it's almost like there's a lot of like divisiveness in me, and there'll be a lot of angst. And once I connect again, I'm like, oh, like it does everything. It helps me love better. It helps me lead better. It helps me have courage. I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely. It makes sense. But I asked if you were subscribing to a specific sort of organized religion, and you kind of gave me one word answer, and then you went on we don't have to talk about that if you'd rather not. I'm okay with that. I like hearing about other stuff. Yeah. I mean, do you go to church on Sundays, or?
I did before COVID.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So So I find it interesting because you kind of said, spirituality and religion are terms that you kind of don't, you dislike, or you find that they don't have much value, but you are a spiritual person, at least by your own admission. And you are also, to some extent, a religious person if you go to church. Right. So
I do. I've grown up, like I've been my entire life in the Baptist church. I think what I don't like, there's a lot of stuff. I do believe in the power of the community, 100% in any aspect in life. Community is everything. I do believe that other people seeking God the way I would be, really honest, not thinking you have all the answers, like full out being like, yeah, there's tons I don't know, but you can't. Like for people who would be like, God doesn't exist. I'm like, you can't tell me what he's done to my heart isn't real.
Of
Like
course.
there's no other way, because I can feel my own humanness because I live so consciously, like I can feel it. And my own sinful, like my own desires, like in a worldly way that aren't going to make my life better. Like if I followed my impulses or my, like, I guess impulses is a better way to say it than desires. But I definitely, I grew up in the Baptist church. I'm a singer. Like I lead the worship team. Like nice. I love to lead people to Jesus. That's like my favorite thing. But there's a lot of stuff that I just don't like the way Christians do it. I don't think any of us are here to judge people. Like I don't on anything. And it's so human, like non-Christians judge, Christians judge, Mormons judge. Like it's human nature to want to put things in and people in boxes.
Yeah.
I just think God's up there being like, just love me and love people and forget everything else. Don't worry about when the dinosaurs were here, and like, don't fight about creation, and don't not love someone because they're gay. And if someone's transgender, like just love them.
Yeah.
You don't need to figure anything out.
So some of those things that you just mentioned, I mean, I agree with you. I think, do you think that, well, this is going to be controversial if I ask it like that. Give me a sec here to reword it. Do you think that some of these religious texts, whether it's the Bible or, I don't know how much you know about the Quran or, the Dhammapada or different religious texts, but, these things obviously contain valuable insights and wisdom, advice that if you put it into practice in your own life, it will transform your experience for the better. I can't think of, there's no denying that. However, there are aspects of those books, and you may have touched on a few of them now, things like homosexuality or, again, the age of the earth and our understanding of how things actually work, the laws of nature. Like back then, they had no clue, right? And so do you think that some of these texts should be maybe revised and slightly updated so that we preserve the good stuff that we just talked about, and maybe try to say, listen, this is actually cultural era specific stuff. These were Bronze Age sheep herders. They didn't know anything about the scientific method, the laws of nature. They didn't know anything about sexual identity, gender, all that kind of stuff. They had no understanding of that stuff. They had a relationship with God, but some of the stuff that they wrote down maybe didn't come from God. Maybe it came from their own culture and their own understanding of things at the time. So like, do you think that it's all 100% good and we should just keep it intact the exact way it is? Or do you think it's worth revising and updating some of these things to fit our modern understanding?
I wouldn't update them. I would change how I look at them.
Okay.
I wouldn't change the text, because I think the text is like, for the Bible, I see it as like God breathed.
Well, maybe, sorry. And when I say update them, I don't mean necessarily change the actual Bible itself, but like, change, our interpretation or how we view some of those passages as like, it was true back then, but now we actually have evolved and we see that who you love doesn't really matter as long as no one's being hurt by it and it's consensual. It doesn't matter if it's two men or two women, because really love is love and God is love. And at the end of the day, this whole thing of like men and women have to be together, maybe that's just an outdated idea that we have. And to make such a fuss about things like gay marriage or homosexuality being a sin is kind of missing the mark. Like you said, just love each other and love God, right? So maybe not changing the actual Bible itself, which I think would be kind of blasphemous, but changing the way we look at it and modernizing our takes on it.
That is like so layered. I have so many like little analogies. I'll give a couple.
Okay.
You know how now everyone gets like autoimmune diseases all the time?
Mm-hmm.
I see that because of the constant bombardment of chemicals surrounding us. Like there's paint on the walls, there's plastic everywhere. There's all these things that are like breathing into our environment. Like I have a latex bed, which is pretty weird and freaking cool and super heavy, but it doesn't let off any chemicals. It's like one of those things. So we are surrounded by chemicals. Yep. Is that the way God intended us to like take things in all the time? No. Is it impacting us on a deep level? Yes. Is it harmful? Yes. So sometimes I look at a lot of these things that we've created in life. Like you could say, I think about back in the Old Testament, and they're having orgies and they're doing all these things. And God's like, stop, like, this isn't how you're supposed to do it and how you're supposed to live. I could go have orgies. I could love everyone in that orgy. I could think this is like the best thing ever. Is it necessarily going to breathe life into my heart? Probably not. I could decide that, like, I think anyone can pleasure anyone sexually with the right things. Like, I just think that's just a woman, a man, like, maybe you're not drawn to that. So like, you're like, reality is your body has physical touch points. It's just anytime you are going to touch those touch points, things are going to happen. Reactions are going to happen in your body. You're made that way. So I think I see it as, and when we talk about epigenetics and the trauma and the things that have happened in our life, I think the world is just layered with lots of sin. And I feel that the more layers of sin, have you looked much at epigenetics at all? And the traumas on your DNA and how they get imprinted?
Yeah, I mean, I've read some articles about it, but I haven't gone deeply into it, no.
It's very scientific. It's not religion-based.
No, I know. Yeah. Right? No. Intergenerational trauma. I'm familiar with it at a high level for sure. Yeah. And it's been pretty effectively demonstrated that certain environmental pressures or events in our lives will actually cause our genes to turn on. So you could have genes that are asleep that have been in your family for generations. And if the wrong thing happens or the right thing happens, that gene will activate. And it's been dormant all this time. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that can be triggered or that can be passed on from generation. Phobias apparently can be passed on intergenerationally.
Totally.
So yeah.
So I do see a lot of this stuff. Like, I see layers of chemicals impacting our bodies and making some, like, creating new diseases we like didn't even know were a thing.
Yep.
I do see a lot of the impact of what our world is just made up of. We can't fix it. We can't. But I do see a lot of it as the choices we've made in the past impact the next choices, impact the next generations. If I was a lesbian, I would absolutely still love God. To me, a lot of the stuff in the scripture, like, if you can look at what they call the 4 spiritual laws, if you can look at, like, the foundation that, like, there is a God who loves you, who created you. There is Jesus who died for your sins, wants to be connected with you, wants that relationship with you. The rest is just cultural. Okay. But if our call to love God, and the 2 biggest commandments are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
I think that whether you're a lesbian, like, whatever you are, if you press into that and just love God, that's all you need to do. Yep. Like, cause I think, like, I don't think that a lot of how our world was God's intention to begin with.
Do you think God had an intention when he started this whole thing? I mean, if he did, it sounds like it got derailed pretty quick.
I know. I don't know.
Doesn't that undermine your faith in that God a little bit? Because if he had a great plan and it got derailed right off the bat because of one piece of fruit, I mean.
I know. And he's way bigger than that. Like, for sure.
I completely agree.
No, and I wouldn't say it doesn't derail me because of what I feel like the Holy Spirit does in me every day. That's, like, undeniable. But yeah, do I get it? No. Do I think that's crazy? Like, I wouldn't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. I agree.
So here's another question for you. And I've been wanting to ask you this for a while now since we started talking, just because, yeah, it's quite fascinating to me. I have had a lot of similar experiences as you. And I've actually come to a lot of the same conclusions as you based on those experiences. So, for example, you're talking about praying to God and he will show you. I have had that, but not in the way that I thought I was going to have it. And certainly not in a way that led me to believe in an Abrahamic, anthropomorphic, human-like God, a God that is looking at us, is personally invested in us. That is not the conception of God that I was led to by my prayers and my explorations. So do you think that it's possible to have a relationship with God as you have, to experience all of the benefits from that relationship through prayer and meditation and whatnot, and still have the core identity of that God incorrect? So what I mean is, could there be a God that is actually connected to you? You are having a relationship with this God, but it just so happens that this God is nothing like the God of the Old Testament. Do you think that's a remote possibility?
Sure. Like, for sure.
And it wouldn't invalidate anything that you've got going on at all. And it wouldn't mean, mean anything negative about you or anything like that. It would just mean that you did indeed connect with the source, but that doesn't mean that the source is as described in the Bible necessarily. You know what I mean?
I don't disagree with you at all.
Okay.
I 100% agree with you. I think that our human understanding isn't made to get it. Like, even if you think about me, transport me growing up to a village in the middle of Africa, knowing nothing, right? So where God's going to meet any person where they're at, it's going to look different. Their purpose, their path, their whatever. And so, no, I don't disagree with you. I think we could have it all wrong. I think there's a lot we don't get right, a ton of it. Like, I still think that the world was here before Adam and Eve and that it wasn't 7 days. I don't see it that way. I see it that there were dinosaurs, there were, layers of dust on the earth for how many years. Mm-hmm. But I'm not worried about it. Yeah. Like, and a lot of people who are really like knowledge-based versus heart-based can't let that go. Right. They're like, I can't rationalize it. I don't have, and I'm so thankful that I don't have a desire to rationalize it, but have we gotten it wrong? Like, there's huge chance of that. And like you said, it doesn't change any way that it's relevant in my life, in my heart. But yeah, I definitely think there's probably a lot we are wrong about, and that God could look totally different. And that's where I want you to watch The Shack, because God looks so different than you could have imagined in an Old Testament God and stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that God is actually a being that is external from us, that is out there somewhere? Like, what's your take on that, in sense of, is the whole omnipotent, omniscient, like, mm-hmm. is God everywhere at all times? Is God in an actual location somewhere in heaven? Is that a physical space? Is that an internal space? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's both. Like, I feel like it's internal, but I also feel like it's external. But I don't necessarily like, mm-hmm. I like totally struggle with heaven. Like, I just kind of am like, I don't like streets of gold. I don't really care about crowns and jewels. Like, that doesn't really get me. Like, put me in the woods.
You don't want to play harp on a cloud for a few millennia?
No. I just, like, my two best friends and I were discussing like what we think heaven is. And it was so funny because I was thinking of The Shack, which everyone has to go watch The Shack.
Yes,
but absolutely. I was thinking of The Shack and I was like, I just want like a shack in the middle of God's beauty with mm-hmm. like a creek, like a babbling brook. And my girlfriend was like, oh my gosh, that is like the worst heaven I could ever imagine. Put me at the Sheraton Cavalier or like the Fairmont Empress. Like, she was like, that. So it was so funny to think how, like, my heaven, she was like, I don't want to go there. That's like camping. Like it's so funny. So no, I do feel like our interpretations of those, like, our brains can't get around it. But I do imagine heaven being like a place where you just don't have any of that angst. Yeah. And you just feel like love and acceptance and all those core desires that we work for. Yeah. In our lives, I feel like that's what heaven will feel like. Right. But I don't think of it as a place. I do think of God as like all powerful. Mm-hmm. But I do know that free will is literally, in my opinion, the worst thing. Like, I could decide today that, like, I don't want to stay in this marriage because out of my free will, I would rather go cheat with that person. And I would rather, but all of these things, like, these are choices that impact a whole bunch of other people. Yeah. Just because I feel like it doesn't mean I should do it.
Of course.
Right. So that's where it's like, if I was always following impulses and things like that, like, I'm not going to live a life that I'm like proud of. Mm-hmm. So I do think he's like out there, but mm-hmm. I do believe the Holy Spirit is like in me.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, how could you connect to something by focusing inward, if it's not in you somehow, right? I mean, there's got to be at least a connection there internally, but no, that's interesting that you say that. And, and I'm not surprised by this, but you're a very reasonable, balanced person. And it sounds like to me, like you're using religion as a tool, or you're using these spiritual traditions as a tool, versus, for most people, being used by the tool, right? Being controlled by the religion, being told what to believe, being told who to hate, who to love, who to judge, who not to, So to me, it's like all of these things, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Taoism or Stoicism, these are tools to help us live better lives. And part of that, for most of us, the better life includes having meaning and having a connection to something greater than oneself. So yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. Because I part of me this morning, I was like, am I gonna ask her about young earth creationism? Am I gonna, and I was like, let's just focus on the common ground. And I feel like we have a lot of common ground despite coming from different traditions.
Yeah. And my brother's a geologist. So like, he was always like, guys, like this. And I just like, and my biggest thing, and I think people, I don't know who the people are, but I feel like I'm annoying to people in the way that I'm like, I can just let it go.
Nice. That is like, annoying for people.
That is annoying because people can't let stuff go. But I'm like, if I had to get everything figured out, like, I don't have time for that. Like, that's like, and you're still not right. You're right according to what?
Yeah.
So all I can do is live this life, practice my life this way. I think the biggest thing, like you said, is owning your shit.
Oh, 100%.
Own your shit, recognize your weaknesses, recognize your unhealthy tendencies. And then for me, I pray to a God to like crucify my flesh.
Yeah.
Give me love, and like, I have to pray a lot because there's a lot of stuff that's like,
of course,
even how I show up every day.
Yeah. You're a human being, like, Jody. You're a human being. I mean, that's part of the fun, right? If you can.
So much fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it was, I want to say it was Alan Watts who said, like, people are miserable because they take for serious what the gods created for fun,
Ooh,
and it's
I like that.
Whether or God created for fun, whatever you want to say. And it's like trying to look at this grim reality of ours as a divine game instead of as of this like purgatory type situation where we're all suffering and we're all working towards some kind of afterlife or some kind of like mountain pinnacle. It's like, no, this is it. This is it. And if you're not having fun here and enjoying it here and having that experience of heaven that you're describing, which is like bliss and no anxiety, if you can have that here, that's the goal to me. Yeah. And whatever comes after, none of us know, as you say, right? So it's like, focus on what you do know. This experience is happening right now. Are you going to let it happen without any, are you going to be hands-off or hands-on with this experience? Are you going to be deliberate in your life, or are you just going to be unconscious and automatic? And Jody, I mean, your work is helping people be deliberate and showing them. So. Absolutely. Yeah, of course, man. You're driven. Every morning you show up, even when you don't show up. Just the fact that you have that consideration in your mind, the fact that you wake up even on a bad day and go, I'm having a bad day. And if you pray, you're going to feel better. And you have strategies that you can follow to make yourself feel better and to be your best self. That to me that's as good as it gets. I have not met anybody who's reached a higher peak than that. Just being aware.
Yeah. I think conscious living, like one of the things years ago, I prayed for, I was like, God, what am I here for? And when I was 17, I felt a call on my heart to be a speaker. Yeah. But I knew at 17 that I was like, Jody, you don't have the wisdom. Like you have to do some living first. And so it's interesting when you feel something years ago, and then I like became a fitness instructor, and then I got into insurance, and I've done all these like things that are just unrelated to that calling. But it's interesting to see how that stuff comes round, and like, it's really in you. You really know. And then maybe someone squelches it, or maybe someone's like, you have nothing good to say, or like in other people's lives. Right. Like, so that's where it's like, I think that's always in us. And so once I realized, like, I prayed a lot about it. And one day it just came to me. I was like, I just want to love people. That desire was always there.
Yeah.
It's not that it became there after I realized, like, I figured it out, but ever since I just step into that every day, like, I will hug people against their will. Like I am like just here to like love you and care for you and elevate you and show you why I want to show other people. Like, and when you affirm something in someone, there's like something on their face that's like I said to my son one day, he was playing video games with someone and it was like not going well. And I'm like cleaning the bathroom being like, what's about to happen? Like, I was like, he's going to lose it. And he just kept being like, just click at the top of the screen. Nope, a little bit over. You're almost there. And it went on for like, I want to say like so long that I was annoyed. and then I said to him after, I was like, you're a really patient teacher. And his face was like, really? And all of a sudden you're like, that could be like something for him. So identifying stuff you see in other people. And then all of a sudden they step into it because they're like, oh, that's a label of me. Like, oh, I'm a patient teacher. So I should teach you how to do this. That's what I do. So it's like, that's my thing is like I feel like God gave me eyes for people that they don't have for themselves. And I love to just like tell people what I see. And now my son, you should see him all the time. Like he's just such a natural leader. And the more I say it, the more he shows up.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. So that's my favorite thing is like, ask yourself, what is my purpose? Because then it flows into everything. It doesn't matter what your job is.
No.
You just love people, or you call things out. Right. So that's what I think people need to figure out and then live into it.
Yeah.
All the time.
Wow.
Right.
That's great advice. Absolutely. Wow. Yeah.
So what's your purpose? What's Oliver's purpose?
I actually had a really good experience about this. I would say probably a month and a half ago, a deep meditation session. And that's exactly what I asked. I said, who am I? What am I? What's my purpose? And it was kind of spooky. I got a very clear answer and words that I had never thought of myself, like to identify myself as. And so ever since that moment, I've been grappling with this and trying to figure out, like, how do I put this into motion? How does this actually look in reality? Because it's like, yeah, anyways, very interesting. Yeah. The message that I got was very cryptic. It was bringer of wholeness. That's what I was told. I'm a bringer of wholeness. I don't know what it means yet. I think I need to keep bringing wholeness to my own life and my own heart. I think I still have a lot of work to do to integrate the different sort of fragmented parts of my body and my mind into one. But yeah, I feel like talking to you as well, that's the thing that keeps coming back to me is like, there is a way to reconcile science and spirituality. Mm-hmm. There is a way to reconcile conservatives and liberals. I think that they're wings of a single bird, and you can't fly with one wing. And that's what we've been trying to do politically for the last however long is, while we're liberals or we're conservatives, no, we need both wings to fly. Yeah. Right. Yes. And so I'm thinking that the religious, the non-religious, there's a way to reconcile all of these things. And so after having received that message, that's what I've been trying to think about. And I think for me, the best way to bring wholeness is to have conversations like these with people who who preferably have different backgrounds and different views, because that's how we integrate all of these different things into a single harmonious whole. So yeah, I'm really happy that you were willing to chat with me and that you weren't put off by some of the stuff that you may have seen on my channel, because that's my goal now. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but in my family, in my community, in the world, my goal is to just bring wholeness and to reconcile the opposites, because there are no opposites. It's all one, in my personal opinion. And in my experience. Do you see
the beauty in that calling?
Of course. Yeah. It's a little scary, but yeah.
But you're made to do hard things.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, one of my prayers is show me the way and I will walk the steps, or show me the work and show me the way and I'll do the work is another one I always repeat to myself, is like, just show me the way and I'll do the work. I don't need you to do it for me. I'm here to do it. I just need you to show me a little bit, because, if it's bringer of wholeness, I'm on board. I'm all on board, but now what? I need your help, please. Like, show me the next steps. Right. So, but I think like you, if you're open and you listen and you lead with your heart, I think that is how God or whatever you believe in shows you the way, right? I mean, I think so. Not too. Like a message of like, go to Douglas Street at 11 a.m. and the next step in your journey will be there. It's like, no.
Wish it was like that. That'd be so clear.
Oh my God. It would make life so much easier, right? But it's like, no, it's not that easy. You got to just stay open and you got to keep your eyes open and be receptive to whatever is. And then little signs will present themselves, I think. But anyway, it's a fun journey, and I'm glad that you were willing to be a part of my journey, and that I could be a part of yours as well.
Anytime. I actually I'm usually terrified by like I told you several times. I was like, I'm so scared, but no, I love talking to you. I would talk to you. I would have coffee with Oliver anytime. This is so fun. It was enlightening for me too, and definitely a very good experience. I loved it.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to do it again on this show or on your show or wherever. So let's chat after this.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
For the Oliver Show.
Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Jody.